I do not have time to cover this topic. It is a big one. We know that people with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, autism are more likely to be victims of sexual abuse and assault, particularly if those people are coded as female and have a vulva or vagina. The rates of sexual abuse there are quite high. Rates can be as high as like 7 in 10 people with a developmental disability may be a victim of sexual abuse. I do not have time to go into all of the details of this, signs and signals, how we discriminate between signs and signals of sexual abuse in children with disability versus typically developing children. But my take home with this is that if we think that sexual abuse has occurred, particularly for professionals, but also for families, that we have a duty to report that so that people whose professional job it is to investigate whether or not sexual abuse has occurred can have an opportunity to do that. That is not something that I do. That is not my job. I do not have expertise in the area of determining whether or not someone has been the victim of sexual abuse. I refer that to the child protection services in the places where I live. So I did want to say that this is real. It is something that can happen. It can be something that can contribute to sexualized behavior, but it is not. Sexualized behavior can be a signal of sexual abuse, but it is not always a signal of sexual abuse. So sexualized behavior does not necessarily indicate that sexual abuse has happened. If you are concerned that that might be happening for your child or for somebody that you are a carer for, it is your duty to report that so it can be investigated. Okay. So we have two different things that I think are important to think about here. And this is the difference between a sexual function and a sexual topography. And I'll talk a bit about what both of these things mean. So a sexual function is why. Why is this behavior happening? And that is because it serves a sexual purpose. Usually that means it's related to some sort of like pleasurable sensation in the body. That could come from a variety of different places. For a lot of people, that's genitals. For some people, it's breasts. For some people, it's other parts of their body. But usually is related to some sort of pleasurable internal sensation. Contrast that with sexual topography. So topography is a fancy word for what does it look like? So that's my person with the like little looking eyes. What does the behavior look like? Is its topography. A behavior might look sexual because of the body parts that are involved. And those are ones that we here probably usually being like adults, helping professionals, parents, may associate with sexual expression because of our experiences with those body parts being associated with sexual expression. But it actually might not be sexual at all. And we, again, the adults, the carers, are really at risk of like putting a sexual meaning on a behavior when that's not the reason why it's happening. So it just has something to do with their body parts, but it's not really sexual in its entirety. And so I think we need to think about who is watching the behavior, who is judging the behavior, and are we putting our lens on it. Again, that doesn't mean that there isn't something that needs to be done. You know, if somebody's touching somebody else's body parts for a function that's not sexual, that doesn't mean we just ignore it, but it's important to understand that it might not be about sex or be sexual in nature. And I want to cue people in here to just really giving some thought to the idea of surveillance. I talked about this with quite a few of the autistic self-advocates that I've consulted with for my work in this presentation. And they talked about this concept of surveillance a lot. So is the behavior being seen because the person is being observed more closely than others? So the example that I gave before about seeing the person in the frozen food aisle scratching at their genitals, is somebody scratching their genitals, adjusting their genitals, pulling up their pants, adjusting their underwear at the same rate that their peers are, say in a classroom, but they're being observed doing that behavior because they've got people watching them more frequently, often with good reason, safety. They need an education assistant to help them participating in classroom activities. But if we look around, are all of the other kids in the class at some point, adjusting their genitals, rubbing their genitals against, the play table in a kindergarten class? Maybe, probably. We're just seeing it more because we are looking as the adults at the people that we're supporting, because that's our job, to be there to watch and to look and to support them. Are other people engaging in the behavior, not getting caught? Definitely. This is where that social bit might come up. So they're understanding that, like, just because somebody can see me, or I can, like, if somebody can see me doing it, then that's fine. But if I don't think, if I can't see them, then they can't see me, right? So the idea that, like, well, under my desk is like, I can't see it, so nobody else can see it. So some of those perspective taking challenges, right? And again, this is not to say, like, it's a surveillance issue. Oh, well, like, they should be allowed to touch themselves even though their EA is sitting beside them. We may still need to intervene and teach around, like, where are some appropriate places that you could do this. You are not hidden in the same way that a peer that's sitting at the back of the class without an EA may be, that behavior might be visible. So we still may need to intervene, but I do think it's important that people just give some thought to whether or not surveillance is at play.